Thank you. Thank you very much. After all these very interesting and substantive remarks, I hesitated whether I should go back to my prepared text or make comments. Probably safer to stay with my text and make comments later on. But before I start, I want to mention that the Munich Security Report of 2017 is quite impressive. The questions raised with such a boldness and depth. And over the past days, we've been trying to understand the answers to all those questions. Probably take longer for people to find answers, but it's very interesting. And it's not irrelevant with Asia-Pacific either. I think for us, coming from afar, it's interesting to watch how the Europeans examine themselves, reflect on themselves. And Professor John Chipman's remarks make me remind us how when you examine Asia, you seem look at things from another angle. For example, here, yesterday, the defense minister, and today the other defense ministers and prime ministers, they were all talking about how important it is for the NATO members to increase their budget, defense budget share to 2%. And it's necessary. It's one of the hot issues debated here. And when talking about Asia, John Chipman, you sound like you Asians are doing too much. And China has been keeping its defense budget at 1.5% of its GDP all these years. And I don't think our State Council agrees to raise it to 2%. 1.5% is quite okay. But every year, when we are having the Congress, I'm the spokesperson of the Congress, and the first question to me at the Congress press release is China's defense budget. And the next day you will read front page stories how threatening China is. So I think in today's world we are more and more globalized, and gradually I hope the standard will become more how to say unified. And we could somehow look at each other through the same light, and we are not enemies to each other. And I also agree that there should be very good analysis of the defense development, and there be good explanation to each other why we're doing so, and we should feel more comfortable about it. But as a Chinese, I think I share the feeling of many of us in China that we are proud that finally we can develop a strong military to defend ourselves. And this country suffered so much in the past, need to be able to stand on its own feet. And China's safety, China in peace, is very much part of the peace and safety of the world. And talking about Asia-Pacific, I would think, I would see the security of Asia-Pacific in two parts. First part is the 20-ish years after the Cold War, and the second part is the since then up to this stage. In the first 20 years, when many parts of the world were in quite a chaotic situation, there were conflicts, there were even wars, Asia-Pacific was relatively peaceful. Countries, as the phrase goes, beat the sword into plowshares, and countries came together, overcame the difficulties, and went into regional integration. And the economy boomed. Many countries in Asia Pacific have grown very fast over those 20 years. And the disputes you mentioned in the South China Sea was there already at that time, but the China and the ASEAN countries and neighbors were able to reach an agreement to shelve the disputes, and we worked out a DOC, and we managed it quite well. It wasn't a problem. And most of the journalists, if you recall, you were not reporting about problems in that region in those 20 years. But in the second part, I think in the past less than a decade, tension seems to become more prominent. There is more concern in the world about the situation in this region. I would think there are a number of reasons. Of course, China has grown stronger. There is growing concern among the neighbors, and China could have done a better job explaining to its neighbors and making them feel more comfortable. But there is also concern on the part of U.S. about China maybe competing with U.S. for the regional priority, the regional leadership role. But from the Chinese point of view, there was growing concern about U.S. Asia-Pacific rebalancing the pivot, the concern that it was targeting at China. But the specific issues which really made everybody nervous was the tension over the South China Sea territorial and maritime disputes. And for China, the concern is that the disputes were there, and China were able to agree with the neighbors that we shelve them, but China never gave them up. But when there were growing provocations especially like in Scarborough of 2012, U.S. openly sided with the other disputing parties, and U.S. was kind of appearing to be a party to the dispute. And that made many in China very concerned. So there was this urge of kind of pushing, of calling for the government to be able to defend our interests, defend our sovereignty. But I think after this period of back and forth, China and ASEAN countries have come back to the understanding that we should find a negotiated solution. We should move, apart from abiding by DOC, we should move into negotiations into COC, which is making progress. I think the situation is coming down a bit, and I also hope there is a better understanding between China and the United States over these regional issues. But generally speaking, in the final, at the heart of the debate about security in Asia Pacific, I think it's a question of exclusive security or inclusive security. When there is the emphasis that there is a security of the allies, how about the non-allies? How about the security of those outside the alignment? The consensus, the Asian way, which was advocated by ASEAN countries, is that the security should be common, should be cooperative security, common security, and when everybody feels secure, then there is security. I think that remains the security concept of the region, and President Xi Jinping also promoted strongly for cooperative security and common security. Only when the security of all parties are taken into consideration, then the region, then Pacific can be Pacific. That's my thinking. Thank you.
Fu Ying, if you were the South Korean Defence Minister, how would you respond to current security circumstances? From a South Korean perspective, is THAAD a reasonable approach? Your thoughts on that and Chinese leverage on the north?
You mean South Korean Defence Minister?
If you were South Korean, did I say something else?
Oh.
In other words, putting yourself in the shoes of the other. Not Foreign Minister Yoon, he doesn't have to worry about that.
I think we all could we slip into the shoes of North Korea a bit. The concern about the Korean nuclear issue is high. I share that. I think for China it's a huge concern. But the solution we've heard around, for example, Ambassador Yun hopes that there will be domestic changes in North Korea and unification, but you said it's a tipping. It doesn't look like those things will happen before the tipping reaches the point you wouldn't be able to bear. And the third is really a let it be attitude. And for China, that is like many in China feels like being stabbed by your friend, your partners. It's it goes. See, if the South Koreans are concerned of the North Korean threat, the conventional threat is already quite formidable, both of you to each other, and the SAT technically does not help South Korea that much. I think, but it concerns China and Russia at the strategic level. You all understand it, and I think for us, we need to ask why the North Koreans want to develop nuclear weapons. Do they want to throw it to Alaska? They know they won't suffer this. They won't stand the second strike. According to the North Koreans, they wanted to feel safe. And my question to all of you is that I know you. No one in this room likes this, agrees with this regime. I share that feeling. But does that country deserve a security at all? And if we all think North Korea does not deserve security, and that country is going to try by every means to find some kind of security, and there's no end of this problem. If we think it does, then we have to address that issue. That's why the Chinese foreign minister said we should talk, because this strategic patience, which means sanction and military pressure without talking, is not working, because the North Koreans have tested 4 times during Obama's administration. So if you don't want the clock keep on ticking, you have to come back and see if you could talk with them and to find a solution to address their concern. The security in North Asia, if it's a bucket, this is the lowest blank. If you don't try to mend it, the water is going to flow out from there.
Thanks so much.
Follow up. I think China has been abiding by the sanctions. China has been going along with the U.S. Thinking and the South Koreans thinking, but China keeps on reminding you only sanctions, only military pressures, without talks. It's not going to solve the problem. And the coming military exercises in March is going to provoke more tension. And China just keep on telling you this is not working, although we're going along with you. But you have to realize that without talking with them, you will only drive them in the wrong direction further. First, I want to talk about the question of a justification. I think in the international relationship, in my experience as a developing country, coming from less experience on the international stage, my observation is that the countries react to each other. Action invites reaction, and reaction invites further reaction. So for countries to deal with each other, it's always important to have some kind of empathy, try to understand why the other side think that way or does things the way it does. And for the Korean nuclear issue, I think many probably in China would regret that 2002 we agreed with the U.S. invitation to get involved. 2002 was when the framework agreement between U.S. and North Korea came to fail. And the framework agreement, which was signed in 1994, was without China's participation, without South Korea's participation. It was solely negotiated between the United States and North Korea, because it was a problem between the two of them. And at that time, I think the United States accepted that the North Korea had a security concern, and they had an agreement that was addressed. And the North Koreans agreed to abandon the nuclear program, and the United States promised to offer them 2 light water power plants and some heavy oil, but didn't work. Neither side delivered. In 2002, United States Secretary Colin Powell came to China. I remember clearly that he hoped that China would mediate over the issue because they couldn't trust each other. And he came February 2002, and you remember March 2002, United States started war on Iraq. And obviously, United States wanted China to help calming down the Korean nuclear issue. And since then, China has been mediating. And it's interesting that 10 years later, many people think that it's China's problem, it's China's responsibility. But when you talk about justification, as a mediator, we tried very hard to understand every party's justification of their position. And that's the role of the mediator. We have to understand why they think that way, and then try to try to narrow the middle ground. And the most successful agreement was made 2005, and it was quite, as you mentioned, it was quite near to a peace accord. And 60 years after the end of the war, there is still no peace accord. It's a very, very strange situation, and it was very hopeful that they could do it. But then, right after the agreement, 2005, the United States found a problem at the Bank of Huiye in Macau, and they started financial sanctions. And after 3 rounds of financial sanctions, North Korea withdrew from the talks and went on with their first nuclear testing.
Can I interrupt just there for 1 second? Go back quickly to 2005 and the agreement itself, as you think it could have happened. What was on the table? Was everything on the table?
Yeah,
and
right.
Give me the elements of what was on the table.
Let me see. I hope I have the things. I think they agreed. I think the North Koreans was going to. North Koreans, I don't have this in details. I think the North Koreans were agreed to abandon practically, and the United States agreed to. I don't have the in details.
As I recall,
I've written
a
long article.
You had
a very quick run of the 2005 agreement. First, the North Koreans for the first time formally committed to renounce all its nuclear weapons and nuclear weapon programs. And the South Korean, for the first time, also indicated it would not develop nuclear weapons. And the second point is that the US has agreed to discuss at the time appropriate light water power plants. And third, US and Japan agreed to normalize relations with North Korea. And four, US and Japan agreed not to have economic sanctions against North Korea. There was no mentioning, there wasn't any mentioning of the troops. And Japan and US would also be interested in providing energy assistance. And South Korea committed 200 kilowatts power assistance program. And for the first time, there was discussion about Peninsula peace regime. Thank you. There's so much I wanted to say. First, about the Korean nuclear issue, I feel more pessimistic now than when I came into the hall. And I think I was there when Colin Powell came to China, asking China to help. And if he said what you said, Don Solomon, Mr. Senator, China would never come in. China wouldn't have come into the situation at all. So I think if we really want to address the issue,
you mean because it would have been unsolvable from your perspective, or why wouldn't you not?
Right. Looks like whatever. I mean, I think to solve an issue, it's important to hear one side of the story. It's also important to hear the other side of the story. Otherwise, you will never solve the problem. So this is how the world works. But I still hope the new U.S. administration would think that talking is necessary, and I still think there is a hope to come in and intervene before the problem goes in the wrong direction for too far. And about one quick intervention about the arbitration. China did not think the arbitration was fair, and there was a list of the things China stated why China could not accept the arbitration. And it's also the right given by the international law for countries to decide to choose how to solve disputes. So it doesn't mean that China does not respect international law. And China I think it's wrong to think that China wants to be the world leader. Far from that. But China would like to play more positive, contribute more positively, to make more positive contributions to today's world if China can, within its capabilities. But China-US relationship, it has been healthy, one of the most successful relationships, I think, and has grown into such a strong substantive level. Now, every 17 minutes, there's a flight between our two countries. And the trade and personnel exchanges, everything have grown so strongly. So there's every reason that the two countries work out their relationship. We've gone through many crises over the past decades because of the fact that the two countries would like to see a better relationship. We both think our relationship is important for us and for the world as a whole. And at this moment, if the new administration would like to focus on the economy, China warmly welcomes it, because that's the area China is familiar with. And we should be able to solve our differences and move forward in a positive manner, in a way that both countries benefit. On the security front, it's a bit difficult. I think I fully understand why there is such a strong emphasis of the alignment. This is the pillar stone for you for years. But I think I would advise that down the road, U.S. need to look a bit beyond the alignment, because Asia-Pacific, the world is bigger than alignment. There are many other countries beyond alignment. And it's okay when the interests are the same, but if the interests, some members of your alliance, some members of your alignment have a colliding interest with the other countries who are not your allies. You need to decide how to address those kind of conflicts. And in order to have a real security, as I said, common security, security cannot be achieved at the cost of others in today's world. Thank you.